is one of the best in the business covering the world of college football, or as the SEC might say it, professional football, as they are now paying their coaches better than some NFL coaches. Kirby Smart, new deal, reportedly 10 years, $111 million from ESPN, ESPN.com, and the family of networks there. Pete Thamel here on the Rich Eisen Show. How you doing, Pete?
I'm not as good as Kyler or Kirby.
That's right. Yeah, Kyler's new name, image, and likeness deal in the NFL is pretty much lit, you know? So it's crazy, Pete. I mean, is there any kimono anymore? Because it seems like the world of college football, the way it keeps on moving, is not just ripped the kimono off or lifted it, it's just burned it. It's done. There is no kimono, right, in college football anymore.
I cover professional football.
You do?
University affiliations.
Right.
That's what it is. And I've always really done that, but it has never been as naked and transparent as it is right now. And that is simply an observation, not a complaint or a judgment.
Of course.
These guys have worked too hard and risked too much for too long to not be rewarded in the ways that they're able to now. And so it is much needed progress. And it's a little bit like there was so many obstacles to get here that now when the dam did finally break, it's a bit of a mess, right? And I'm not saying that there should be guard. People use these coded words. There just needs to be some rules. Like in the NFL, for example, like Kyler is signing a new contract, and when he's under contract, he can't sign a contract with someone else. Like it's just it is a little bit of a free for all that I think can really be harnessed with a little bit of guidance. But of course, when there's no one in charge of your multi-billion-dollar industry, that makes it a little bit more difficult. So
yeah. I mean, that's the issue here, and that's why I think not just the money, not just the television contracts, but the need for guidelines and rules when it comes to name, image, and likeness, when it comes to, I guess, what the Division I Council's talking about just transfer period being anybody could go anytime, multiple times, and play right away as long as they have academic standards that are met. That's the reason why there will be super leagues formed, so they could create their own rules that the coaches and the schools in a smaller grouping will be able to agree on, and that will be an impetus more than anything else, Pete. What do you think?
I don't know if there was a question in there, but you went from everything from like an obscure NCAA council to super league. So the breadth of what you commented on was impressive.
Thank you. But no, there was not a question. Well, I guess, what do you think is my question about all that, Pete?
Yes, I think what your thesis underscored that it's a bit of a mess right now, and the lack of there being leadership makes it a bit of an untenable mess. I think one thing that goes missing a little bit, Rich, in this is that the Supreme Court itself actually has sort of paved the way for what this thing is going to look like in the future. And I do firmly believe, and have written before the USC-UCLA move, was that conferences are not going to be subject to antitrust rules, whereas overall NCAA and college sports decisions could be. And so in a sense, Justice Kavanaugh and the crew there gave a roadmap to how college athletics could look. So, for example, if the SEC now decides it wants 22 baseball scholarships, I believe there's 11.7 or 11.9, some number like that now. Like, they can do that, and then it's going to be up to the ACC to decide if it wants to do that. So there's a bunch of proposals right now that are being discussed about limiting coaching positions. Right now, there's obviously 10 staff members who can go on the road and are sort of full-time coaches, and there's a gabillion analysts and such anyway. But, like, why should you limit the amount of coaches who can coach players on the field? I think that's a little bit inefficient and counterproductive, right? Like, if why choose to have a special teams coach, for example, or not have a special teams coach, or an extra D tackle or DN coach or whatever? I think the more coaching, the better. So all these little things are going to be decided, but I think the notion of someone becoming in charge, we need a commissioner, everybody says, we need a commissioner. Well, do you think someone can just magically appear atop the food chain and everyone's going to just listen to them? All these leagues, the commissioners have the most power. They certainly have more power than Mark Emmert, who basically hasn't been woken up from a long nap in about 8 years in charge of the NCAA. And then the NCAA just committees everything to death, right? So this latest this transformation committee that's meeting, and I hope they come up with proposals that change and clarify and guide the whole enterprise forward. But I've seen about 8 committees hailed to be transformational, so I'm not exactly holding my breath. This is the one that's going to transform it. So I hope they do. But my cynicism has been developed over seeing a lot of untransformational committees, including the Condoleezza Rice one to clean up college basketball 5 years ago in the wake of the scandal, and they still haven't punished hardly anybody from that. So it is a beautiful game and a terrible business, and I don't see either of those things changing. Thankfully, the games remain beautiful.
ESPN college football senior writer Pete Thamel here on the Rich Eisen Show. Moments ago, you asked, who would be a commissioner, right? I mean, somebody's not just going to appear that everyone would listen to. In lieu of all that, I think the commissioner of college football is Greg Sankey. He sounds like one. He looks like one. And it does appear he holds a lot of cards. I understand there's the Big Ten still as well, having just brought in, having turned right here Los Angeles into Big Ten country. But Sankey, absolutely is leading the conversation about college football playoffs and things of that nature. What did you learn from SEC Media Week, Pete Thamel?
Well, I think I learned that if you're going to be Big Ten country in LA, you should get Big Ten weather 3 months a year.
Hey, sorry. Hard pass, sir. Hard pass. I'll take turned leaves, but other than that,
Slate skies and cold winds right down Sunset.
Right.
What I learned from SEC Media is interesting, right? Like we're in this era of a power two, and I'm certainly not afraid to call it that because that's what the finances dictate. And I'm sitting here at ACC Media Day doing this interview, so I'll probably get some dirty looks from the folks outside the so-called gated communities, as Jim Phillips called them yesterday. But and the Greg Sankey versus Kevin Warren dynamic is going to be a dynamic that shapes the future of the whole sport, just like Mike Slive and Jim Delaney did, in a past generation. The Sankey Warren dynamic is more adversarial than maybe the Slive Delaney dynamic was, and it's very interesting. Each of those leagues obviously is primarily tied to a large cable television network or large television network, so that obviously adds to some of the intrigue around this stuff, Rich. But my takeaway from SEC Media is, look, they've won 12 of the last 16 national titles, and I think Clemson, Ohio State, and Florida State won. Clemson won 2, and those were the other ones. So they are the dominant league, and the statistics certainly dictate that. And when Michigan goes and lays a dinosaur egg in the playoff like they did last year, Rich, it doesn't help that dynamic. So that was a joke. But
it fell flat. It fell flat.
I could tell.
It fell flat, Pete. But the imagery is vivid, no question about it. So the question is the SEC says they're not looking to expand, right? And so have we just seen the seismic movement of 2022, or is there more to come? What do you see from that?
Interesting question. I've been writing that we're in a period of peace until that period ends, right? Like there's no movement until there is, and the dynamic of like there's a clear moat between the Power 2 leagues and everybody else, and I don't think we're going to see a flurry of movement next week from those two in particular. But I think to sit here and say in 5 years they're not going to be at 20 would be naive too. Like they're going to move at some point, and it's a little bit like spy versus spy. There's binoculars in suburban Chicago, and there's binoculars in Birmingham, and they're peering at each other constantly. And the available, viable, and profitable chess pieces are few. So Notre Dame obviously being the primary among those, and then if each is going to add 4 to keep round numbers, it's not like a list of 30 they're picking from, right? It's the 2 Pacific Northwest schools, and then there's sort of your menu du jour of ACC schools, and that's obviously a thicket of the grant of rights, which I won't bore your listeners with legal jargon, but basically it will be expensive and legally risky for schools to leave the ACC in the next 14 years. That's not to say one won't do it within that 14-year period of time, but I don't see anyone imminently taking that up. So there's pressure on the ACC now to find new ways to generate revenue. So,
wow.
But yeah, long story short, like the next move is going to be dictated in large part by whoever wants to, feels the need to grab properties deemed valuable. So that is, long and short. Like North Carolina to me is fascinating because they're one of the few schools that would actually fit in both leagues, that would be desired by both leagues. There's I think it's the ninth biggest state in the country, the Charlotte, Raleigh market. There's good players in the state of North Carolina, very, very good players in the state of North Carolina. And it's a great brand, right? UNC. Basketball is very good, which probably matters 15% of the whole thing, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have the Heels playing on a Monday night in April. That's a good thing. And, UNC football has been generally irrelevant for the last generation, but Mac Brown has recruited well. They haven't necessarily played well the last 2 years, but you could see them, playing Penn State in the Big Ten, and you could also see them playing South Carolina, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you choose North Carolina out of all this. Like Clemson is the first one on everyone's lips, right? And then now
Sure.
Miami with Mario Cristobal there, bouncing the turnover chain, and you got Florida State, right? I mean, so
sure.
why?
Well, I just think geographically, right?
Yeah,
it fits in both, and I don't necessarily know if you can see Clemson in the Big Ten, right? And that's not knocking Clemson. They have earned on the field more than anybody in the sport, not named Alabama, in the last decade. So but there is, I roll my eyes at myself when I mention this, but there is AAU schools, and the Big Ten still does have a bit of snobbery, despite offering you a degree, Rich. They still hold themselves to some high standards up there. So, fit in presidents and all that stuff does become important. So, but I just bring up Carolina because I could see that being one coveted by both places, but more so not wanting the other one to get it. Does that make sense?
Sure, of course. I mean, that's the battle that you talk about, the spy versus spy. Yes. Great Mad Magazine reference that you mentioned between the SEC's home office and the Big Ten's home office. And just because I know, Pete Thamel, you're a journalist of the highest order, the Big Ten offered me 2 degrees. I went to Northwestern graduate school. Just wanted to make sure you understood that. That might sound like a humble brag, but this is all in the spirit of accuracy, Pete.
Yes.
Okay. Pete Thamel here on the Rich Eisen Show. So before I let you go, Notre Dame, what is their move? What in the world is their strategy, right? Because the word was the Big Ten wanted them with USC, didn't get that. And so what is Notre Dame's deal right now? Pete.
So, Rich, I think they're enjoying their newfound popularity. If you think about when Jack Swarbrick took over, maybe 12, 15 years ago, I vividly remember because I was at the game. It was Big Ten weather. Charlie Weiss lost to UConn at home. The great Randy Edsall trounced the Irish in South Bend. So there weren't exactly visions of grandeur of playoff appearances and undefeated seasons and such since then. So you fast forward to now. They're the prettiest date on the dance floor. And Notre Dame is not going to go to a league unless they're forced to, or they see scenarios unfolding that forces them to join a league. So there's 4 years left, Rich, on the CFP contract. There's 4 years left on their NBC deal. I don't think they do anything until the future of both of those things becomes clearer. The CFP is really the key here. If the CFP is organized in a way that limits severely Notre Dame's access to the playoff, there's probably a better chance that they'll join a league. But that's probably going to take 2 years for all those commissioners who aren't exactly getting along famously right now. It's going to take about 2 years for them to decide on that. So I think Notre Dame's going to sit back and wait that out. And then I think they're in a really good position to cash in on a TV deal. They've had, 3 undefeated seasons in the last decade or so under Brian Kelly, regular seasons, I should say. They played for the BCS title, poorly, but they played for it, and they made two playoffs, obviously, under Brian after that. So I really feel like if you're Notre Dame right now, there will be a lot of bidding because they're Notre Dame. A streaming service has a lot easier time buying 6 or 7 home games a year than they would, taking on a league package and having to, put the Tuesday night Utah-Washington State game on television or whatever. Like there's a lot of infrastructure that goes into a lot of these deals, and Notre Dame doesn't really. They offer a lot of pop without a lot of the backroom investment. So I really think Notre Dame would be in position to cash in a significant way. And if it was always all about money for Notre Dame, they would have joined a league a long time ago. They make less annually from TV stuff than like ACC schools do, and certainly Big Ten schools do. So I think Notre Dame is going to sit back and monitor the chessboard, enjoy its newfound status as the prettiest girl in the dance floor, and they will wait and see how the other moves unfold. But they haven't been in a rush to join a league for a century, and I don't think they're going to continue that. Here's one little good spy versus spy nugget for you.
Yes.
I am skeptical that the SEC would agree to a playoff that boxes out Notre Dame and forces them to join the Big Ten. Does that make sense? Because they'd be essentially giving the Big Ten the best property on the board, and that's bad business. So I think they'd create a playoff. And look, the playoff, people forget, Rich, is really a television contract.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it will probably be a 2-network television contract. So I don't see the playoff imminently becoming exclusive, because whatever those 2 TV networks are, they're going to own properties outside of the Big Ten and the SEC, right? So they're going to want those properties to have a vibrant shot at the playoff. They're not going to undercut their other investments by terming them second tier and not giving them access to the playoff. Does that make sense?
Yes. So when Greg Sankey says this week, hey, that whole idea I said that other people outside of our world can be part of a playoff that we'd agree to, let's go back to the drawing board where none of those can come in. He's kind of not telling the truth, because if he does that,
so
that forces Notre Dame to the Big Ten or something like that.
What he said this week was like, let's not have automatic qualifiers for the playoff. Let's just bring in the top-ranked 4, 8, 12 teams.
Right.
So now it's both logical and completely self-serving, right? Because 6 of the 12 teams could be from the SEC some years. 5 of the 12 teams could be from the SEC some years. And then some years the Pac-12 might not have a team there, so they might not make it. So, like, everyone's stance on this is rooted in their own realities.
Yes.
But one of the realities that was reinforced in the past month is that the Big Ten and the SEC are going to have likely a bigger say in how that's shaped.
Pete Thamel, really appreciate the time. There's so much. I literally could talk to you for a full hour, but you've got to go back to your gig, and I got to get to a commercial break. I appreciate the time. Let's do this again. Please look for my call more often. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Appreciate
you. You bet. That's Pete Thamel right here on the Rich Eisen Show from the worldwide leader in sports.